Okay, so once again, I want to welcome you, all of you listening to me, all of you that are going to be watching this presentation, and so on. So again, today I decided to come on board because I really want to share some thoughts about some of the common issues that we face in our society as far as relationships are concerned. And the reason why I decided to make this particular, I don't know if I should call it training or this particular session or this recorded session right here. I mean, it's just from a conversation which, of course, I had a few days ago with somebody. And of course, this person was actually complaining and said, oh, she has been, of course, met somebody and they have been getting along very well. And they even went ahead and they had a child. And she doesn't know why this man does not want to commit and so on. And I believe that you listening to me right now, it is not something very new. I mean, relationship issues, commitment. Maybe the man doesn't want to commit, or maybe the woman doesn't want to commit, and so on. And to an extent, I mean, we can admit that most men nowadays, some of them do not really want to commit in relationship and so on. And like the case I just mentioned earlier on, I mean, she was complaining. I don't know why this man does not want to commit to commit himself into this relationship and so on. I mean, and she's really ready to settle down. I mean, it can be very frustrating, but again, before we look at a similar scenario as we talk about different things in this particular presentation right here, one of the things I want you to first of all know that this lady herself, she had a child already. And of course, meeting this guy later on, they actually had another child altogether. And of course, in today's session, I intended really to talk about type of children that control the home or type of children that indeed control or bring confusion in a relationship. And in the course of that, we are going to be talking so many things inside that and so on. But again, um I may be referencing to a lot of women, or at the same time, I may be talking about women as a whole. Why? Because there are a lot of things that make them vulnerable in a relationship. So now let's try to start by talking about when love meets a family order. And this is one of the very first problem, which of course I have come to realize when talking to so many people. And we might not see that as a problem in the current society where we are. But again, for me, looking at things from different perspective, it's just a serious issue. I mean, if we continue the rate where we are today, I'm not sure what the society is going to look like for so many families. So again, the goal of this conversation is not to indict any woman or any man out there, but again, it's just for educational purpose. And it is my prayer that once you listen to this presentation, then you should be able to take something constructive from it. So again, we are going to be focusing on talking on what I call when love meets a family order and so on. Now, it is a dream of every man, or for most men, or for most women, or some men, that they do not all fall in love, but they should be able to find perfect partners with whom they are going to actually live in a very beautiful family. A family where they are going to have peace, a family where they are going to have love, and a family where they are going to have joy, what they call a peaceful family, and so on. And I'm going to start by saying love can attract a man. Of course, that is true. I mean, love can attract a man. We see that all the times. You see men attracted to love. They see women, they run after them, maybe because they are beautiful, whatever be the case. That is not even a hypothesis that we need to debate, right? Love may always attract a man. But one of the things that will establish that man is what I call the household order affects the commitment of that man. I know it might be a little bit too early for such a hypothesis, but on the other hand, a misplaced child authority can actually make a marriage feel very much unsafe. So again, these are the three bullet points that are going to guide us throughout our conversation uh of when we're talking about love conversation this evening. So we are going to be talking about love. We're going to be talking about when household order actually is reversed, what makes it very difficult for some men not to commit to certain women, especially when they have a child. But again, please, it's not an indictment against women, but I'm just trying to use this for educational purpose and awareness purpose right there. So again, we are going to be talking about when authority in the house is actually misplaced. So again, in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 12, the Bible makes us to understand that a threefold cord is not equally broken and so on, right? So again, we agree that on that. So now, let's look at the next picture right here. So for me to really have this discussion, I am going to try to have us look at the concept of love as a whole. But this time around, I'm not going to try to define what love is all about on my own terms, because I'm sure if I were to ask every one of you out there to define what love is all about, I mean, some of you might just simply say love is the feelings you feel when you feel as feeling it, right? And of course, that is going to be subjective and that is going to be right. You are not going to be wrong, but again, that is your definition. But this time around, we are going to actually take off from the definition of love from the same point of view or from the same perspective. And this time around, I'm going to use Robert Sternberg's theory of love and so on, of course, from a psychological point of view, so that all of us can use and understand this discussion from the same framework. So, according to Sternberg's theory of love, yeah, so I was saying, according to Robert Sternberg's theory of love, there are three things we are going to be talking about, which of course is my desire that everybody understands when they are getting into a relationship. We don't just need to allow our emotions to, hey, I am in love with this woman, I'm in love with this man, and then we just start going and we feel that that is just simply what love is all about. First of all, we're going to talk about a little bit about intimacy. And intimacy here in this theory can be a little bit misleading if you hear intimacy for the first time, and you may feel that it is related to sex and so on, but which is not exactly what this theory is. Intimacy in this context is talking about here. So again, intimacy in this particular context is talking about the ability for us to establish that emotional closeness, to establish what we call trust, and to establish that connection right there. And many of you will agree with me that when you meet a woman or you meet a man for the first time, I mean, the very first thing is like, okay, can I trust this man? Can I trust this woman? Because trust becomes the primary key to establish any relationship and so on. I mean, if we have to look at things from the developmental psychology of Eric Harrison, we are going to see that trust is either trust or actually mistrust right there. But again, you see that it becomes a very, very powerful factor right here. But now, intimacy, therefore, is that ability for that man to say, hey, I can trust this woman. I have been with this woman. I know her very well, and vice versa. So you believe that, hey, because you can trust her, then you can commit your life to her as well. So again, because of that trust, emotional closeness can be. You begin to look at her as somebody I can confide secret, and vice versa. The woman, you look up to the man as somebody you can actually trust. You can actually confide your secret to him as well. And before you realize it, there is connection that is being born right here. Now, remember that when we're talking about connection right here, we are not talking about just simply emotional connection. The connection here is just the compatibility that is going to actually keep you guys going together. You are going to be bonded by that same connection. It can be cultural connection. It can be a religious connection, but whatever thing that really, really brings you guys together for you all to be bonded, right? That is what we are talking about right here. Now, the next thing we are going to be talking about here is passion. Passion definitely is one of those, I would say, areas which we practice on day to day. And when we're talking about passion right here as a second level of defining love, then this deals with what they call attraction, right? It deals with desire. It deals with, of course, relational energy. And of course, this is where a lot of people get themselves hooked and they want to express their love. And it ends up usually in what sexual relationship and so on. So if we have to talk about infatuation, infatuation is actually going to fall in this category of what passion right here. And next, we are going to be talking about commitment, which is where the main problem is, and we are going to be focusing right there in our discussion today. Now, commitment is the decision, the loyalty, and the long-term responsibility in that relationship right there. Whether the relationship is leading to marriage or is not leading to marriage. But again, there must be a decision at one point. When you say, hey, I want you to be my girlfriend, I want you to be my boyfriend, I want you to be my husband, I want you to be my wife, it means that you want to actually take some decision, right? You are taking some decision to commit yourself to him. And of course, one of those pledges you will always hear is, okay, I promise that I'm going to be loyal to you. I'm going to be faithful to you. I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to do that. It's very, very common in our society. Okay. So the thing is the long-term responsibilities. In every relationship, there are responsibilities, right? All of us are bombarded with a lot of bills. Who is going to pay the bill? Who is going to do this? Who is going to take the children to school? Who is going to bring them back? Who is going to take them to the doctor's appointment? Who is going to have actually do the assignment and so on? So we have so many things that we are actually going to be talking about. So again, it is easier for you to bypass the first gate of intimacy. Hey, you have shared everything you can share, and then you go to the second stage of your love relationship, which has to do with attraction, desire, passion, sexual relationship, or whatever be the case. Now, the third one is where you need to think twice. Whether you have to commit yourself in a seasonal relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, or you have to commit yourself in a long-term relationship like marriage, for example. So you see, marriage becomes very difficult when commitment enters in a stage of disorder, which we are going to talk about it. And of course, for our reflection, love without boundaries can become control, can bring guilt, and of course, confusion. And if you read the Bible, First Corinthians chapter 13, from verse 4 and 7, it says, love is patient, it bears all, right? It said, love is what? Patient, and it actually bears all. Now, let's go to the next topic, where we are going to be talking about healthy homes need a structure right there. We just explained the foundation of love according to Robert Sternberg and so on, where he talked about three different dimensions or stages of love. We just saw the foundation of what I call passion, or what he calls passion. We just saw intimacy, and now we saw commitment and so on. Now, remember that we are not just talking about a man and a woman right here. So, in most cases, or in some cases, we are now talking about the third party in this relationship, and that third party is going to be called children or either a child. And we all know that children need love, they need attention, and they need security as well. Children also need what to have limits, they need correction, and of course, they also need adult leadership and supervision right there. So again, in blended families, a love must not remove that, love must not remove authority and so on, because again, authority is what helps every family or every relationship to be able to work and so on. So a stable home balances compassion, discipline, boundaries, and consistency, which we are still going to get more into it as we advance. So now let's talk about some statistics right now. And of course, I'm going to explain to you why I think it's so important. Now, something drew my curiosity because I was browsing through the internet and I was just typing randomly, doing some research, and I was trying to see the rate of single mothers and teenagers and so on more precisely in our society because it has become like a tradition, a norm, whereby most teenagers between the ages of 19, maybe between the ages of 15 and 19, before you realize most of them are pregnant, and especially in developing countries where there is no law to enforce, especially child abuse, it is very, very common. And I was so surprised that when I typed that on my search engine, it gave me a statistics that about in 2023, about 90% of the US population, not population, about 90% of teenagers of age 15 and of course 20 in the US were of course pregnant. So you can imagine that what that means. I was like, okay, no, I need to make sure that I'm reading right because if the statistics from 2023 shows that the girls between the ages of 19 to 20, of course, account 90% of some of the female pregnancies or teenage pregnancies in the United States, then this is just simply absolute chaos, right? Absolute chaos right there. But again, the good thing here is that those statistics seem to have dropped from 2024 and up. So if you happen to listen to what I am saying, then this is actually being recorded in 2026. But now let's just try to get some rough estimates of what some of these statistics actually talk about right now in about 2026. So again, about 137,273 US births were to mothers ages between 15 to 19 years. And those statistics actually tied in for 2024. We'll talk about teen birth rate and of course 12.6 birth per 1,000 females ages 19 to 15 years. And if we look at it, more than 1 million something birth were to unmarried women in the year 2024. And of course, again, that accounted of a total of about, let's round it up to 40% of the US population were to unmarried women. Okay, now let's look at the psychological trauma of what we're talking about right here. I know we are just talking about statistics, and these statistics might not mean much to a lot of people right here. Just assume that in the United States, for example, 40% of women, they have children, and those children, they said they have never been married. Okay, now just imagine that whole picture right there. Now, talk less of women that are married and they are divorced and they have children, or talk less of women that had maybe husbands and they died, and finally they became widow with children or a child. Now, if you compound all those things, you might see that it may actually grow up to almost like 80%, right? Okay, that is an estimate I am trying to put that in your mind right there. So now let's try to work on 40% of the US population. Of course, the children that are born to these women are not married. Now, it may look so okay, it may look so normal, but there is a trend that is rising up that, again, many women and many young girls, sometimes they do not see the consequences until when the right time for them come. Maybe they want to settle down, and that is when they begin to see the reality right there. So, of course, children, we know lessons from God is a heritage which we cannot deny. But now let's begin to look at some of the realities right now. Why is it that women always carry a lot of burden? why is it that women always carry a lot of burden? Before we try to look at the statistics, I am going to chip in because according to some research that I conducted, the bond between a woman and her child is mediated by oxytocin, which of course is stronger than any love relationship or any sentimental relationship that she can ever have. And that has been proven by psychologists. And just looking at the society or looking at most women, as a whole, we are going to really agree that such research is actually correct right there. Why the bond between a father and a child may not be so strong, but again, between a mother and a child or her children, it's so strong because it is mediated by oxytocin right there. So that being said, now let's look at why women often carry more burden than men. First of all, 78% of custodial parents were mothers in 2022. Let's just pretend and round it up to 80%, right? So 80% are women when it comes to talking about custody of children and so on. In 2022 in the US, those were women, okay? Now, let's say 22% of custodial parents were fathers. Okay. Now, if we have to look at it right here, it's almost a discrepancy or differences of almost like 40%. We are just trying to round up things right here. Now, we continue. Custodial mother families had about 22 or let's say 23% poverty rate. Okay. And of course, custodial fathers families had about let's say 12% poverty rate right there. So these are some of already uh, the statistics that are existing right here. I mean, this is not a personal blame. It is just a burden of custody, caregiving, and financial strain, and so on. So again, if you can imagine from the previous statistics that we saw, that if let's say 40% of the US population actually are women or teenagers that have children and they have never been married before, and they fall within the statistics right here, you can imagine exactly the trauma and the stress that they can be going through and so on. Now we are getting to the main point of the argument here and so on. Now, just imagine yourself that a child or a girl or a teenager, she got pregnant maybe when she turned 18. And of course, I'm now a big girl. I have my rights. I can defend myself. I can do what I want. And she therefore gets into a relationship, or maybe she's 19. And before she realized she's pregnant, of course, she took the decision. Nobody forced her, right? But now, this is a problem right here. She got pregnant of course, or she's now pregnant. But now what next? Okay. Now the child is there and she has given birth to that particular child. What is going to happen right now? Now, this child has not yet built a capacity of self-financial sustenance. Okay. So how is she going to cope with that particular child? Now she has a future ahead of her. She's going to be struggling to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, because she wants to provide the child, the needs of the child, and so on. Or she needs to be paying for babysitting, or she needs to depend on social benefits from the government in order to survive or to put food on the table, and so on. Now, in most cases, we're going to agree that most teenagers who end up having children, and sometimes some of them don't even know who is actually the father of the child. And even if you know the father of the child, it might just simply be someone of her age who cannot take responsibility over that child and so on. And you see, the two of them are just frustrated. The two of them are in the same boat and so on. They were driven by, of course, their hormones, and they got into something that they do not have a very solid understanding. Age alone, whether you are 18 or you are 19, does not account for maturity. Having 19 years is one thing, but having the experiences of life that it takes to sustain you and to build your character is another thing right there. So again, most of these women, sometimes they begin to desire marriage. They want to get married. Here's my dream is that when I finish college, I get a job. I want to get a God-fearing man. Now they are talking about a God-fearing man, a man that is not going to cheat on them, a man that is not going to maltreat them, a man that is not going to maltreat their child. Now, that is your mindset. Your mind now is getting clear right there after the damage has been done. Okay. So now, when that happens right there, there are a lot of regrets, there are a lot of pains, and there are a lot of self-realization that kicks in right here for some of them, and they begin to look for, again, how they can cope with life. And worst of all is that most women or teenagers that end up having children, they never end up with the parent or the guys who actually got them pregnant. Again, that may just be the end of it. They may just know that, hey, this is the father of the child, and so on. And from my own observation, again, sometimes women, they always want to claim, I am so self-independent. I can take care of my child. Even if you don't take care of my child, I will take care of my child. This happens most especially if there was actually a breakup or the breakup was not positive between the teenager and, of course, even the man. So again, I'm using teenagers right here because those are the most vulnerable population when it comes to women. But this is also applicable to women and so on. And even women that have been married and they are divorced and or whose husband already has passed on, but they are still having a child to bring as a single mother and so on. And as we advance, we are going to be looking at some of the mistakes that, again, single mothers they do without realizing it. Because remember that the whole concept of this discussion here is talking about what is it that men usually have that difficulties to commit, especially to marry a woman who already has a child. And we are going to look at the arguments together. And of course, again, some of the arguments might be subjective, but again, this is going to help answer a lot of questions. Remember that when we started talking, I gave you a scenario of a woman. She fell in love with a man, and before falling in love, she already had a child. And so she fell in love with a man, and they went through the different stages of love we spoke about. They went through the stage of intimacy, they went through the stage of passion. And of course, in between the stage of intimacy and passion, she got pregnant again. When she got pregnant this time around, again, she finally gave birth to the child. But now, what the problem is the last stage of love, which is commitment. The man is not going to commit, even though she loves the man as hell. But again, the man is not going to commit right there. And the question is, what could possibly be the reason? A lot of men are having the same issues right there in the society right now. Women are having the same issues right now. Oh, I am ready, but he doesn't want to commit. All he just needs is sex, 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 sex. That is the language you will always hear, and so on. So, again, what are some of those factors to watch out for, especially when children are already involved? So my next point here, I'm going to be talking about a child may already occupy a position of power in the house. Of course, I am going to try to break that down as we advance. A serious man may feel expected to provide, but not too late, and so on. I mean, this is just the worst thing that can happen to a man. Any responsible man, hey, women, you are dreaming, I need a responsible man, a man that is going to take care of me, a man that is going to love me, a man that is. Now, looking at it from a psychological perspective or attachment theory perspective, you find that at a certain point, when a woman or a teenager, when she has children or a child, now her love for her is conditioned based on a different attachment that she feels secure right there. So again, even though she talks about love, but a woman without a child, when she's talking about love, she cannot define love in the same context as a woman that already has a child, because the woman that has already a child, she is looking at things from both from the end of security for her and for the child and so on, which in one at one stage it can be defined as a form of materialism in quote, which is not applicable in all cases right here. So this is where perhaps the attachment psychological theory comes in here to explain the psychology of different women with children who are actually going into marriage, right? Or going into any relationship. So a serious man may feel, of course, expected to provide, but not late. And this creates the fear of responsibility without authority. Now, the key word here is what? Responsibility without authority, which is just simply one of the things that we are going to really focus on right now. Now, when I say some women desire marriage, but they have unresolved family disorder, again, let's look at it for example. A young girl has a child. Now she is struggling, but at the same time, she comes to her senses now, like the prodigal son in the scripture, right? Now she wants to marry, she wants to settle down, but now she carries burden, hurt, the pains of the past, the pain of separation with a boyfriend, the pain of separation with the husband, and so on. Now she finds herself in a whole universe of her own, and the only support that she has right there to feel her loneliness, to comfort her, it's just simply the child that she has. But right now, again, she feels that, hey, the child I have is the only thing I have on the planet Earth right now. But again, what is that going to produce? That is what we are going to look at. The problem is not motherhood. The problem is disorder before commitment. So once disorder precedes motherhood, then it becomes very, very difficult. And the book of Amos, chapter 3, verse 3 says, and two walk together, except they be agreed, or unless they agree, depending on whichever version of the scripture or the Bible you are looking at. So now this takes me to the most important part of this discussion, where I'm going to be talking about the exchange of power in the house. And we are going to be talking about the types of children or the type of a child that we have. And I am going to like categorize them. And there are some categories of children which I categorize them as the dictator type of children or a dictator child. Now, who is a dictator child and how did that dictator child come about here? Just imagine from all what I've said in the previous picture. You have a woman, you have a teenager, she just had a child and so on, and she has gone through relationship upheaval and she has just broken up with the boyfriend or the husband or whatever be the case. So she finds herself in a whole universe of her own. She doesn't know what to do. And the other thing she knows is that now I am faced with the responsibility of taking care of this child. So what am I going to do? Now, remember, this is where, therefore, again, we begin to appreciate the fact that, again, a home is balanced between a father and a mother. Because remember that a proper education of a child is not just the ability for you to be able to send the child to school, to be taught or to provide the needs of the child. But again, there are better or there are more sensitive part of the child which are unseen, which are all the developmental, the psychological, and the emotional balance that is needed for this child right here. Now, this woman or this mother or this lady, permit me to use this terminology, is now bound to bring up a child without a man. Is now bound to bring up a child without the head of an authority, which is the man. And of course, the man is the head of the household. I mean, we are going to look at it from a Christian perspective. I know there are many opinions as to who is is the head of the household, but we are going to look at it from a Christian perspective where the man is the authority of the house. So when a woman, especially teenagers who are still struggling with their identity role and confusion, are trying to even know who they are. Who am I? Where am I going to? How do I get to my destiny? And they are finding themselves with the burden of bringing up another individual. The education that they are going to give to this child is not going to be a foundation which is going to help this child to be able to stand. And now this is when we start talking about the different type of children that can be bred as a result of the single mother parenting. And now we talk about the dictator child. The child's emotion control the household decision. Of course, yes. There are so many single women now that are making a very big mistake. Listen carefully. If you are a single mother, you are a lady who has a child, and maybe you are struggling on your own right now. The very first mistake that you are doing, which is going to be costly to your life tomorrow, especially in terms of marriage, is that first of all, you are bringing up a child whereby the child's emotion is going to control the decisions of the house. How does that happen? In most cases, when a woman or a woman has a child and there is no man, or sometimes she's struggling with economic balance, The tendency is that when the child comes, mommy, I need this. You say, okay, take. Mommy, I need a game. You buy and give. Mommy, I'm doing this. You give. When it's time for the child to go to bed, say, mommy, I don't want to go to bed right now. You say, okay, honey, you don't want to go to bed. When you feel sleepy, you go to bed, okay? The child says, yes. The child is going to remain on the computer or playing games for maybe or roadblocks or whatever be the case. The child remains there playing them for almost 5 hours. And in as much as the child gets distracted by any activity so that you can have your peace of mind and freedom to focus maybe on schoolwork or focus on any other thing, you as the mother, you are fine. Now, what are you indirectly telling that child? You're indirectly telling that child that, hey, anything you want to do is okay, in as much as it doesn't disturb my personal freedom. So now you are now making the child to become a dictator. Why? Because the child now is being wired. Remember that that is the only source of joy that you may have at a particular moment. So if the child says, I want to eat but hamburger, you say, okay, honey, when I'm done doing what I'm doing, I'm going to take you out there, you're going to eat. And the child says, okay. So now you have built a mechanism in the child whereby the child's emotions and decisions actually will control the household. So when the child says, I don't want to eat this food, let's go out and eat in the restaurant, you say, okay, you are doing it because you feel that you don't want to hurt the child. You are feeling it because you feel that you love the child so much. You see, there is a way that you train a child. But that child is going to be a reflection of what you give that child. I mean, it's not when you are rich, providing to your child does not mean that you care for that child. Providing for everything the child needs doesn't mean you love the child. Sometimes withholding provision from the child is the best discipline or the best love that you can show a child. So now, this is just simply an example we am trying to put together right here to see how a dictator child is actually being built, whereby the decision of the child will learn to say, hey, if I am asking something, then I can yell, I can cry, I can beat myself, I can bump my head against the wall, and my mother is going to give it to me. Now, you as the woman, this is my only child. Remember that you, the woman, you have so many unresolved wounds that you carried in your previous relationship, you carried in your previous disappointment, and perhaps from the moment of your age right there, you have been frozen. I mean, your growth has been frozen. So right now, you are using your child as a coping mechanism right there. You allow the child to have his way. And this type of children, they never know to, they can't even take no for an answer. Obviously, they can't take no for an answer. The child has been on that tablet for 5 hours. You say it's time for you to go and sleep. No, mommy, I'm not feeling sleepy right now. You are talking to the child. The child is so focused playing games and he doesn't pay any attention. You say sweep the floor, go and get your room ready, and so on. He doesn't even pay you any attention. And he becomes so addicted to maybe games or other stuff that you see him talking to himself. When he fails the game, he can even slam the computer or the tablet down. That is telling you that that child is already out of control. Remember that what you are building, the Bible makes us to understand if the foundation be destroyed, what then shall the righteous do, right? So now you are helping to build a foundation which is going to fight against you tomorrow. Whether you like it or not, it's going to fight against you tomorrow. Now, again, we are talking about a child's emotions and control your household and so on. Remember that it's not only controlling your household, but it's going to control you tomorrow, right? So we're going to come back to there. So the next thing is this is not a fixed personality. Remember that it's not the personality of that child. It's just simply a character that in an attempt for you to escape from the pain, the loneliness, the unresolved wounds of the previous relationship. Now you tend to build that image around your son or around your daughter and so on. So now again, it is a learned role inside the family system. And that is something that grows within the family system. You may not even realize it and so on. So the child discovers that strong reactions can reverse adult decision. Remember that children are very sensitive, right? Children study their parents. If you are the type of mother, your child has the ability to study you, and your child knows exactly what will be able to turn you on. The child knows that if I use this behavior and this reaction, this is how my mother is going to react. This is how my mother is going to react. And once a child studies and understands your fear and understands your pain, even without expressing it, that child has the ability to use those gimmicks in order to manipulate you, to get their way, and so on. That is just simply how it is growing. You might not see it, but that is a foundation that you are building right here. So again, child holds the power to tell the family or to tell your life what your life is going to look like, and so on. So again, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 15 says, a child left to himself brings shame to the mother, right? A child left to himself brings what? Shame to mother, and so on. So now we are going to therefore continue and talk about this behavior type and so on. Now we have seen some of those characteristics of what, again, a dictator child is, what a child of that nature can do. Because once power slips from the hand of the woman, because there is no central authority, that is the man, in order to be able to bring balance. Again, that is a possibility of the type of child that is going to be birthed right there in that particular family or in the life of that particular woman right there. So now we talk about demands immediate and so on. Now, you see, sometimes mothers realize this when it is already too late. When I say it's already too late, what do I mean right there? Well, the child has developed that stronghold already in him or her, and maybe the child is already 9 years old. And you want to apply discipline or you want to demand for immediate compliance. Hey, you must not do this. Hey, you must not do that. Hey, this is that. But it's already too late. Why? Because the child already grew up with the atmosphere of yes, yes, yes. Everything is permissible. Now, before we even come here and look at this, what is the effect on a man? Let's say you are a woman and you had a child when you were a teenager, and you brought up the child who ends up being a dictator type of child who doesn't know how to accept no for an answer. Now, you will now see a man that you love. You have consumed intimacy, you have consumed action, and now is at the level of commitment. And this man comes to the house. The first day the man comes to the house and sees your child or sees the child of whom he is supposed to be the stepfather or the stepchild. And the child sits on the computer for 5 hours. And he says, hey, you can't be on the computer for 5 hours. All you need is 30 minutes per day. Get your book and read. He says, no. Okay. Now, that is where the real problem begins right here. There is already a clash of authority right there because the child now is going to see the man as a competitor, and that is going to be a serious problem right there. Now, the man too now has already seen that is already a problem because he can provide, but in as much as he doesn't exercise authority, then he is not a man. When he says, stop, it's time for you to go to bed, he says, no, when I finish playing my game, I'm not sleepy, I am going to go to bed, and so on. Now that is where the real problem is starting right there. And you see, it becomes difficult to reverse, assuming that the child is already 5 years, 9 years, whatever be the case, and you are bringing another man. And this child already knows that you are not the biological father. That is where things even get messed up and crooked right there. Because again, at the back mind of that child is who are you talking to me? By the way, you are not even my father. So on. And that is what is there, even if it is not expressed, but one day the common expression is going to be out. You are not my father, and so on. So now you see how, therefore, there's a clash of authority that is being established right here. And this clash of authority began by you, the single mother, not realizing that you were reversing power and you were entrusting the child to be the head of the family. Now, this man loves you so dearly. This man is willing to do everything for you, but the fact that there's a structure which he cannot penetrate is the main problem why he cannot commit, because a man is not going to commit in a family or in a relationship whereby his dignity, his authority is going to be looked down. That is just going to be the worst thing right there. He might still hang around pretending I love you, maybe because he needs sex, or maybe he needs some form of favor from you, and so on. But deep inside him, that man knows that he is running into something that he cannot easily dismantle right there. And that is where you, the woman, you begin to realize that, hey, there is something that is going on. And by that moment, you begin to feel frustrated because you will literally sometimes see how the man is already frustrated. Because a man cannot be in the house struggling to provide, and the child is going to tell you, Mommy, I want to go. I don't like the food that was cooked in the house. It's not good. Can we go to McDonald's and eat? Can we go to the restaurant and eat? And you just leave the house with the child that you want to go to the restaurant and eat when the man is there. So now the man begins to look at you as the woman. He begins to see your flaw. And now it's already almost too late and difficult to reverse. Now you, the woman, there's two hypotheses that is going to happen right here. When the man tries to correct the child, it is either you, the woman, who lacks maturity. I don't like the way you talk to my child. I don't like the way you talk to my child. And guess what? That is the end of that relationship. The man cannot commit beyond that. Why? Because first of all, one, the man has already seen resistance with the child. Secondly, the man is already facing resistance from you. You are now calling it, oh, you don't like the way he talks to your child. But you, as the woman, you created the problem without even realizing that you created that particular problem. And now you complain, I don't like the way you talk to my child. And most of the times, some women are going to say so in front of that child. And that is going to make the child feel like I am King Kong. Now I have the full authority in the house. So that child is going to go closer to the mother, take side to despise this man. Believe me, this man is never going to commit in your life anymore. And that is where the problem comes from. And on the flip side of stuff, if the woman tries to align with you to correct the child is going to say you're supporting your husband more than me. That is why you don't love me, and so on. And the child begins to withdraw. And when the child begins to withdraw, that is a wrong image that the child is interpreting, because first, the child does not understand that he or she has a wrong foundation. And now you, the woman, you begin to see now the errors that you did. It's almost getting too late. And so sometimes you, the mother, you just want to, I want immediate change. You hear me? You must respect him. You must love him, and so on. Again, immediate demand. When you begin to bring that discipline, when already it's too late, the first thing you are going to hear is the child is going to refuse. He doesn't accept that. He says, no, Mommy, he's not my father. I know who my father is. Now, for you as the woman, it is going to be traumatizing because you know that man will never commit right there. If that child is going to use another man to challenge his authority, and you still want that man to be there providing for that child without authority, responsibility, no, it doesn't work like that with men. I mean, remain, let me put it that way in quote to distinguish, right? So that is why, again, it becomes a serious issue. And sometimes you see, again, when you try to correct that behavior, the child is going to break out with anger. The child is going to break out with trust. The child is going to break out with tantrums. And of course, all forms of attitude. Sometimes you are going to see the child is even going to interrupt the adult conversation and even the family plans and so on, rejects responsibility and expect privileges and so on. You reject the man's authority, but yet you want the man to help you. You want the man to take you to school. You want the man to pick you up from school. You want the man to go shopping with you, but yet you don't want his authority and so on. Yeah, that becomes, the man sees that as a form of exploitation because he knows that he doesn't have any legal rights over the life of that child. Why? If the child already is, you are not my father, Psychologically, he knows that committing to you is going to, and in the life of that child, is just a waste of time. Why? Because a child is just winding time until she gets to 18 or he gets to 18, then that is where you already see things are going to unfold and so on. So psychologically, men already know all these things and they see it happen on day-to-day basis and so on. So when women now, or some of our sisters or mothers, and they begin to complain, oh, they don't want to commit. All what they just need is they just need sex. Oh, that is all what they need, and so on. All men are hypocrite. No, no, no. It's not that men are hypocrite, but the psychology of a man. Again, men already know where things are going to end. Now, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath. A soft answer turns away what? Wrath. So, again, there are many things we can talk about, but fast forward, let's talk about again in detail how, therefore, the rule actually develops. Now, most of this behavior of a dictator child, how does this develop? Because I'm sure some of the women listening to me with children, you begin right now to realize some of the mistakes I am talking about. And sometimes you may be asking yourself the question, man, I'm sure what he's saying is true. I agree with him. I disagree with him. Of course, I mean, you can agree or disagree with me. But how does it sometimes usually occur? Number one, sometimes you take rules and the rules are never enforced, and so on. You say something now, in the next second, you don't enforce it, you ignore it. Now, the child will never take you serious. If you tell a child that, hey, you don't have to be on the tablet more than 1 hour in a day, of course, that is certain. It doesn't mean you should ban them completely from the tablet. We live in a digital age today where they use tablet in school. You may allow them to be there, but let the children know that when you say they have 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes. When they have 1 hour, it's 1 hour. Don't say, oh, they have 2 hours today. Tomorrow you say they have 4 hours. Tomorrow you become consistently inconsistent. So you make rules in the house, but you cannot enforce the rules in the life of the child. And so that child already knows that, hey, you are not somebody I can take you serious. Why? Because what you say is not just simply what you mean, and so on. But remember that children are very good at testing you. They will test you, they will see how you behave, and so on. Now, the next thing is the mother feels guilty after divorce, separation, or abandonment. And that is obviously true. When you feel after a breakup of a relationship, the woman will like, the guilt is going to be there. Okay, it's maybe my fault and so on. Maybe I'm not good enough. I mean, you start asking yourself so many questions. At this particular moment, the pain of abandonment, loneliness is going to creep in. Who are you going to find as a means of consolation? A immediate person you tend to look up to is your child. You have to take up that child as a shield in order to shield your vulnerability, your pain, and the guilt. And sometimes it's the guilt come as a result of you competing with that man. Now, you know that the child, if you are a woman and you are having a female, you know naturally female are always attached to their parent. So now, in order for you not to have the child that you have as the only source of joy, being attached so much to our father, now you are going to struggle with every guilt to make sure that you don't lose that particular trust right there. You want to gain the trust of the child at all costs. Why? Because the tendency of the child being attached to the father is very, very high. So now, you see, it is a struggle that therefore the single mother has to go in here. Remember, whether you are divorced or whether you're separated from a boyfriend or whatever so the case, that guilt is always going to be right there and so on. So again, because of that guilt, discipline also is lessened. You don't apply discipline as though a man was in the house to be able to mutually help to bring up that particular child. The next thing we are going to talk about here is the fear of losing the child's affection, which I just explained. I have seen situations whereby, again, you see a man and a woman, they may have a child, and the child is more attached to the man. Why? Because the man is going to take the child out and buy whatever thing that the child wants. Okay? And you know, men, they hardly have time to cook. And I mean, some men, they hardly have time to sit in the house and cook. In as much as we can take the child out to a restaurant, we eat right there, we buy all the sweet things that the child needs and so on, the child is going to feel so comforted and so on. And that goes for either parent. If you, the mother, you take the child out, you buy everything the child needs, whether toys, whatever, depending on the age of the child, that child is going to feel a form of attachment or preference over you than the other father who does not do that. So the child is going to use your provision as a form and expression of love. And again, it's going to show you more affection and so on. And because of that, women, they have that tendency. Sometimes you see a woman in order to show her revenge after a breakup, especially a relationship where they were never married, and she will go and dress up the child so good and put that on social media, flash the child, make sure that you tag friends and families right there as if it is a way to provoke the man. I am capable too of taking care of the child. I mean, this is just an unnecessary struggle that we are building upon ourselves, right? And so on. So again, mother fears of losing the child's affection and so on. And next, we talk about the child learns that escalating changes. The child learns that escalation changes outcomes and so on. So again, the child has learned how the child can manipulate you. The child can put your button to the extreme, and the child already knows exactly how, again, you are going to react right there, and so on. So, again, conclusion, train up a child in the way that he should actually go. That is just simply the big picture right here. So now, generally, women or girls, what lies behind that behavior that leads to establishing what I call a dictatorship child and so on? Well, we have fear of abandonment. It's already one. She has already been abandoned by the man she thought was everything for her. The man finally got access to what he wanted, got her pregnant, and abandoned her. She's now regretting. Now, the only thing she has so dear is my child. Now, she needs to do everything to preserve the trust of that child and so on. That is one of the fears. The fear of being replaced. The child can still choose the other partner, the person with whom you had a child, because the woman is not having a child by herself, unless maybe she got a child through other means of insemination or whatever be the case. But we are talking a case where she had a child with a man. So she's afraid of being replaced. Why? The child's attention, love, and affection is going to shift away from her, right? The fear of losing the mother's attention is one of the things. Anxiety about new uh, step siblings or a new husband is another thing right there. Is this man coming into my life? I know he lost me, but is he going to love my child and so on? And sometimes you may say it's very, very common for you to even hear, and they will tell you, oh, if you want to love me, love my child. If you want to love me, love my child. Of course, the man came because he loved you, but now don't put the child as a condition, because if the child becomes a condition, and the man already has seen the vulnerability and the foundation which you actually place, it is obvious that the man is not even going to commit anymore. No matter how beautiful you are, no matter how much he loves you, he might still pretend to be around because he knows that he's going to get one favor or the other from you, but not because he's still committed right there to marrying you. And before you realize it, one day you only hear he's gotten married or he got another girl pregnant and so on, and you become so disappointed and devastated. All you will say is that I don't want to see you. This should be the last time. Don't call my phone again. You block the phone. But the question is, there was a very big mistake you made in the very beginning. There is much to talk about it. And of course, perhaps we may create some time again for me to do another talking on this. Remember, we are just talking about one type of child right here. So let me fast forward this. There's a lot that we still have to talk about, but we might not cover everything in one sitting or just in just one video and so on. But if you want to, and if you watch this video and you love it and so on, and you want to know more while waiting for other stuff to be posted, I mean, you can just simply go on Amazon and there are 3 volumes of books that I've written related to this topic. Number one, the first volume I wrote here is marrying a single mother, understand the truth, the risk, and the reward right there. And the next one is the blended boundary, which of course helps a man and just like a woman or women in general to assess yourself, how you are ready and to see, have a picture of what, again, starting a new relationship is going to be like. So again, this is talking about blended families right here. And of course, one of the volumes in the same category is talking about children who control the family. So children who control the family, I just mentioned just one of them. I just talk about a dictator type of child. And we have many other behavior types that we are going to be analyzing in the course of time to see exactly how they control the family. And the whole purpose of this, as I said in the very beginning, is not to indict anybody. We men as women, we all make mistakes at one point in our life and so on. But again, we shouldn't make the mistakes twice or thrice. Why? Because, of course, it might become very, very costly. And before we separate, according to statistics that, of course, I read right now in the United States, the divorce rate is actually 50% right there for first marriages. And if you, as a woman, you divorce and again, you want to get married, then the divorce rate in your second marriage with children lays from 50% to 67%. And if you are living a second marriage for a third marriage with children, then the divorce rate actually escalates from 67% right there to almost 80% and so on. So that is just the current statistics about divorce right now in the United States. You might be watching me or watch this video from any part of the world. Again, the signs are all clear and the signs are visible in every other part of the country. The country of where you're watching me may not have the same statistics pattern, but all the threats and the patterns that I just spoke about the dictatorship, the dictator child, is actually very visible. So if you're a single mother or a woman or a lady who just had a child and you are not with the father of the child, just simply pay attention to the way you lay the foundation to the life of that child. Why? Because that foundation is going to be something that is going to either break you tomorrow or is going to actually make you tomorrow. Either way, that foundation is actually going to be something that is going to either make you laugh or something that is going to make you cry. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this was just a discussion, and there are many other things for us to talk about as again, in this particular part of it, or remember, we are still talking about a dictator child, and there's so many things to talk about a dictator child. Again, we see their behavior, we see the faults of the mother, and so on, the wrong foundation they laid. And one thing that I'm only talking about women. I mean, I talk about women because they are most vulnerable. So it's a way of actually waking them up. Hey, be conscious. This is actually the reason why men, some men do not want to commit and so on. And if you are conscious about it, I think it's going to be the best way to help you to be able to wake up, not to fall into the same slumber again. Once again, I pray that this piece of information is going to be a blessing and it's going to help you correct some of the flaws of the past. Shalom.